She was left sick and alone by her own children, but a stray dog fought to save her. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always awesome to see how far our stories are reaching. Margaret Harper, a 72-year-old woman, had kind eyes and pale skin etched with wrinkles that told stories of a life full of sacrifice. Her white hair was always neatly tied in a bun, and she still wore floral perfume every morning, as if waiting for someone. But no one came. The clock in the living room ticked like a cruel reminder of her loneliness. Since falling ill with heart problems and limited mobility, Margaret relied on rare visits from her children, James and Laura. But it had been weeks since anyone showed up. She struggled to get up alone despite the pain to fetch water or make a watery soup. The fridge was nearly empty, the pantry holding only a few forgotten cans. Silence was her only companion, along with a faded photo of her late husband on the living room wall. On a grey Sunday morning, she tried calling her children. First James, who answered in a rush, sounding impatient. "Mom, we've talked about this. I'm swamped with work. Maybe next weekend, okay?" "I just wanted to hear your voice, honey," Margaret said, her voice barely a whisper. Silence on the other end. Then the line went dead. Laura didn't even pick up. Margaret stared at the phone for long minutes, as if it were a portal to a life that no longer existed. Outside on the wet sidewalk, a scruffy figure watched the house. It was a large German shepherd, its fur dirty and a visible scar on its left front leg. Its dark brown eyes were fixed on the window where Margaret rested on the couch. It seemed to sense something, a pain like its own. That night, Margaret had a mild health scare. She felt dizzy, her chest tight. She lay on the couch with difficulty and cried quietly, whispering a prayer. "Lord, if you're still there, please don't forget me." At dawn, she heard a strange noise in the backyard, a soft scratching at the back door. With effort, she approached and peeked through the window. Her eyes widened at the sight of the large dog lying by the door, its gaze calm and gentle. She hesitated, but something in those eyes touched her deeply. "Are you alone too?" she asked, almost without realizing. She opened the door slowly. The dog didn't move. It just looked at her as if it knew it was safe there. "Come in, buddy. I don't have much, but you can stay." It stepped inside cautiously, looked around, and lay down near the stove, as if the spot already belonged to it. Margaret grabbed a bowl and poured some water. Then she opened a can of tuna, her dinner from the night before, and shared it with him. "I don't have much, but I don't have anyone either. So, if you want to stay, you can." The dog raised its eyes and, without barking, gently wagged its tail. She smiled, for the first time in weeks. "I'll call you, buddy." Monday dawned with a sky heavy with grey clouds, as if the whole universe shared the sadness that filled Margaret Harper's small house. She woke with a soft groan, her body stiff from another night on the couch. But this time something was different. Buddy was still there, lying at the foot of the couch like a silent guardian. When she opened her eyes, he lifted his head and wagged his tail slowly, as if saying, "I was waiting for you." Margaret reached out her frail hand and gently stroked Buddy's head. "Good morning, my brave friend." Buddy moved closer and, with care, rested his muzzle on her knee. It was as if he understood, as if he felt her loneliness and, with his presence, told her she wasn't alone anymore. With great effort, Margaret got up to make a light tea. Buddy followed her every step, like a loyal shadow. He didn't bark or make a sound. He just watched her with attentive, almost human eyes. That afternoon, James arrived without warning. He let himself in with the key he still kept from when Margaret was more active. "Mom," he said coldly, glancing around with disdain. "What's with that dog?" Buddy immediately stepped in front of Margaret, alert but not aggressive. James took a step back, startled. "His name's Buddy. He's a good dog. Showed up on his own. He looks out for me." James frowned. He was well dressed in a suit and white shirt, as always. A businessman. His eyes showed no warmth, only impatience. "Mom, this can't go on. This house is too big for you alone. You're not doing well. Laura and we've decided you should move to a care home." Margaret stayed silent for a moment, her eyes filled with tears. She knew her children well. This wasn't concern, it was convenience. "A care home? What about the house? We can sell it. The money will cover your expenses and you won't be alone." "But I'm already alone," she said, her voice trembling. "And you don't even call. Not you. Not your sister." James avoided his mother's gaze. Buddy let out a soft, almost inaudible growl, making James step back again. "That dog can't stay here. If he goes, I go too. James sighed heavily, frustrated. You're not in any condition to decide, Mom. She didn't reply. She just sat slowly in the armchair and stroked Buddy with tenderness. The dog settled beside her, as if he knew this moment mattered. If you want to take me out of my home, you'll have to do it by force. As long as I'm breathing, this is my home. And he's my family now. James stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Outside, he called Laura. She won't sign. She's worse than we thought. We'll have to take legal steps. Inside, Margaret closed her eyes, breathing heavily. Buddy gently licked her hand. It's okay, Buddy. As long as you're here, I don't feel lost. Wednesday brought a heavier silence than usual. Margaret Harper woke with a weight in her chest. Not physical, but emotional. She hadn't slept well. James's visit had left her heart in turmoil. But there was Buddy lying by the door, ever watchful, his ears perking up at the slightest sound. When he noticed her stirring, he got up right away and walked to her side. "Good morning, my love," she said. "I don't know what I'd do without you." She spoke to him like an old friend, someone who understood the language of the soul. That morning, Margaret tried walking to the mailbox, something she hadn't done in weeks. She clung to her cane, and Buddy stayed close by her side, attentive, making sure she didn't stumble. Each step was a victory. Each yard she crossed was a battle won against her frail body. At the gate, she found a letter. It was from a law firm. With trembling hands, she opened it. The notice was clear. Her children had started a legal process to declare her incapable and take control of her property. Margaret stood still, as if the ground had vanished beneath her feet. "They want to erase me like I'm worth nothing." Buddy gave a soft bark as if sensing her pain. He stepped in front of her, head tilted. She sank slowly onto the wooden bench by the gate and cried quietly, like a lost child. "They're not happy just forgetting me. Now they want to take the only thing I have left." Autumn leaves fell gently around them. The air carried a soft melancholy, like the quiet end of something. That afternoon, Margaret didn't want to eat. Buddy stayed close, unmoving. Every time she sighed, he lifted his head. He seemed to know it wasn't hunger eating at her, but despair. As night fell, a car parked in front of the house. Laura stepped out, holding a folder, wearing an expensive coat and a cold, almost indifferent expression. Buddy stood up instantly, his back tense. "Mom," Laura said, "I came so you can sign the papers. This is for your own good. You can't live like this." Margaret looked at her with empty eyes. "I haven't seen your face in 3 months, and now you show up, be with papers." "Mom, don't be dramatic. We just want to help. You can't stay alone with the stray dog." "I'm not alone. He takes better care of me than both of you combined." Laura sighed, losing patience. "If you don't sign, we'll move forward anyway. The law's on our side." Margaret stood with difficulty. She was pale, exhausted, but there was something in her eyes. Buddy seemed to catch it instantly. "This house isn't just bricks. I lived here with your father. You grew up here. If you want to take it by force, it'll be over my dead body." Laura turned to leave, offended. "Then don't say we didn't warn you." As the car sped off down the road, Margaret dropped to her knees, overwhelmed by everything. Buddy rushed to her, gently pressing his body against hers to keep her from falling completely. "Why are they doing this, Buddy? What did I do wrong?" Buddy licked her hands as if to say, "You didn't do anything wrong. They're the ones who lost their way." The week dragged on with the slow weight of someone walking toward an unavoidable fate. Margaret Harper no longer had the strength to go out to the garden. Her body ached more each day, but what was truly crumbling was her spirit. Buddy felt it. He slept less, ate less. He stayed alert, always watchful, as if he knew something was about to break. The house was wrapped in a thick silence, broken only by the ticking of the old clock and the soft creak of the wood warming in the afternoon sun. Sometimes Margaret talked to Buddy as if he were human, and he, in his quiet attentiveness, seemed to understand every word. "I used to think that when I got old, my kids would take care of me," she said, stroking his head. "But it turns out the only one who stayed was you." One afternoon, while napping on the couch, a loud knock at the door woke her. Buddy was already standing in a defensive stance. Margaret got up with effort. When she opened the door, she faced 2 strangers dressed in black, looking formal and distant. "Mrs. Harper," one of them said, "we're here to inform you that, by court order, your children have taken legal custody of your assets. We have authorization to begin inspecting the property." Margaret felt the ground slip away beneath her. She tried to protest, but she had no strength left. Buddy, seeing the men try to step inside, barked loudly, his tone clearly a warning. One of the men tried to push him with his foot, but Buddy moved forward, not biting, just pressing with his body until they backed off. "Control your animal, ma'am, or we'll call animal control." "He's not an animal, he's my family." She stood between Buddy and the men, arms spread, trembling. "You have no right to come in like this." "Legally, we do. Your children already signed. The order is official." Buddy stayed on guard, but he sensed Margaret was about to collapse. She clutched her chest with her left hand. Her breathing started to falter. "Please, no more." The men stepped back, unsure. One pulled out his phone to call her children. In that moment, Margaret fell to her knees. Buddy rushed to her, barking, trying to support her with his body. She collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Buddy's barks cut through the air like a desperate cry. He ran to the door, barked loudly, looked around the street, then returned and licked her face urgently. A neighbor, Susan Bennett, a middle-aged woman who lived across the street, heard the barks and rushed over. "Margaret, what happened?" She saw Margaret on the floor, Buddy beside her, agitated and whimpering softly. "Call an ambulance, quick." The men, unsure what to do, left the house. Susan knelt beside Margaret and took her hand. "Hold on, dear. Help's coming. You're not alone." Buddy lay beside her, never leaving her side. His ears were low, his eyes wet. It was as if the whole world had crashed down on them. The county hospital smelled of disinfectant and loneliness. Margaret lay in a narrow bed, hooked to monitors tracking her faint heartbeat. Her eyes were closed, her face pale and sunken, as if her soul had retreated for a while. Beside her in the hallway sat Buddy, still, his head resting on his front paws, watching the closed door of room 214. The doctors didn't want to let him in, but Susan Bennett insisted. She convinced them that this dog wasn't just any animal. He had saved Margaret's life. "That dog is all she has. Let him see her. He might do more than any medicine." Finally, a young, kind nurse agreed. She opened the door, and Buddy walked in slowly, as if afraid to disturb something sacred. He approached the bed and lay beside it, barely touching the blanket with his back. Margaret, though unconscious, murmured something faint. "Buddy." Her eyelids twitched slightly. A single tear rolled down her cheek. In the waiting room, James and Laura argued quietly, uneasy under the stares of other patients. James held his phone, nervous. "We can't let that dog stay with her. It's going to mess everything up." "You hear yourself?" Susan said, overhearing from the doorway. "That animal saved her. You two abandoned her, and he was the only one who stayed." Laura crossed her arms, clearly annoyed. "We did what we thought was right. Mom needs professional care, not a pet." "He's not a pet. He's a four-legged angel," Susan replied, her voice breaking. Just then, a man entered through the main door, tall, in a state police uniform, with a firm expression. His name was Tom Carter. Susan had called him about Buddy. He recognized the dog the moment he saw him in the room. He was one of the canine dogs missing for months after his officer died in the line of duty. "That dog, his name's Buddy, right?" Tom asked, looking through the half-open door. "Yes. He showed up at Margaret's house. He's been protecting her ever since." Tom nodded, moved. He approached with respect. "I worked with him. He was in the search and rescue unit. When his partner died, Buddy vanished. No one saw him. Until now." Susan's eyes welled up. "Well, now he's found a new mission." Tom knelt by the bed, gently petting Buddy's head with reverence. "Good job, partner. You're still serving." Buddy looked at him calmly, then turned his attention back to Margaret. At that moment, she slowly opened her eyes. "Where am I?" Tom smiled. "You're in good hands, Mrs. Harper, and you're not alone." Margaret turned her face slowly toward Buddy. Her fingers reached for him, as if to make sure he was still there. "My God, thank you for not letting me go alone." Buddy let out a soft whimper and closed his eyes, calm, as if he knew he'd done his duty. The days that followed were tense but calm. Margaret stayed in the hospital, weak but awake. Her recovery was slow, like someone climbing back from the edge of a cliff, guided only by a thin thread of light. That thread had a name: Buddy. The hospital allowed Buddy to stay in the outdoor area by her room, on a blanket near the window. Every time Margaret opened her eyes, she looked for her loyal companion first. And when she found him, a faint but deep smile spread across her face. "You're still here, aren't you? You didn't leave me even when I wanted to give up." Buddy answered with that look that held words humans couldn't speak. Meanwhile, Tom Carter did more than visit. He started an investigation into the legal actions taken by James and Laura. With Susan's help, he gathered stories from neighbors, nurses, and even records from the local health center showing Margaret's long neglect. One morning, Tom visited the hospital's social worker, Emily Foster, a woman in her 50s with a kind face and a firm tone. "Officer Carter, what you're bringing me is serious. If her kids declared her incapable just to take her property, that's fraud and gross neglect. And there's a silent witness," Tom said, pointing through the glass where Buddy slept with his head between his paws. "That dog kept her alive. Literally." Emily nodded. "I'll request an urgent review of the case. And if needed, a legal restriction against her own children." While this happened, James and Laura were notified. Their reaction was quick. They arrived at the hospital together, their faces hard, as if they were victims of a great injustice. "What's going on?" James demanded, spotting Tom in the hallway. "What's going on is that your mother has rights, and now someone's willing to defend them." Laura raised her voice. "We're her family. Now you remember?" Susan said, appearing suddenly behind them. "When she was passing out alone in her house, not one call. When that dog slept by her cold bed, not one visit. You gave up being her family long ago." Laura huffed, her eyes flashing. "And that animal's going to get everything. That animal chose her." "You didn't," Susan replied. James tried to push past to enter Margaret's room, but Buddy was already standing. He didn't growl or bark. He just stood in the way, eyes fixed, body steady. He wouldn't let anyone near without Margaret's permission. Inside, Margaret heard the voices through the wall. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then, with effort, sat up. "Let them in. I want to talk to them." When James and Laura entered, they faced a frail woman, but with eyes lit by something they hadn't seen in years. Dignity. "You've hurt me deeply. More than the illness, your abandonment broke me." James lowered his head. Laura crossed her arms, uneasy. "We thought you were losing your mind, Mum. You're the ones who lost your way," she said, her voice slow but firm. "And now, you're finding it again because of this dog." Buddy lay beside her again. Margaret stroked him gently. "He doesn't share my blood, but he has my soul." A week later, the sun peeked through the hospital windows, warm and gentle, as if the universe wanted to give Margaret Harper some hope. She could now sit up on her own, and though still weak, she'd regained something stronger than physical strength: her voice. Buddy was there, as always. He slept by her bed, woke when she woke, and stood whenever a stranger entered the room. He was her shadow, her shield, her comfort. Emily Foster, the social worker, arrived early that morning with big news. "Mrs. Harper, the case review is done. The court ruled that your children acted with neglect and manipulation. As of today, you have full legal rights back. The house is still yours. No one can force you to do anything." Margaret closed her eyes, a slow sigh escaping her chest. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me my voice back." "You took it back yourself," Emily said with a warm smile. "We just listened." As Emily left the room, she crossed paths with Tom Carter, who arrived with an older man, grey-haired, in a similar uniform. "Mrs. Harper, I'd like you to meet someone," Tom said. "This is Captain William Brooks, former commander of the K9 unit. He came to see Buddy." The captain approached slowly. His eyes teared up when he saw the dog. "I looked for him for months. We thought he was gone, but it seems he was on another mission." Buddy looked at him, stood calmly, and walked over. The captain knelt, hugging him tightly. Margaret watched quietly, her heart beating stronger than it had in days. "He's a hero. He's saved many lives. And now he's saved one more," the captain said. "Are you going to take him?" Margaret asked, a lump in her throat. Tom shook his head. "No, Buddy's done his duty with us. Now he belongs to you, if that's what you want." Margaret stroked Buddy's back as he returned to her side, as if he understood everything. "He found me when I had no one left. He protected me, defended me, made me believe again. Of course I want him to stay." Just then, Susan Bennett appeared at the door with a paper bag in hand. "I made pumpkin bread, my mum's old recipe. Thought you might like to share it." Margaret smiled. "I'd love that. It's been a while since I had visitors who came just to visit." The three adults settled into chairs around the bed. Buddy, as if he knew something good was happening, lay quietly at their feet. As they broke the bread and talked about simple things, the weather, childhood days, old songs, Margaret felt her home wasn't just a building, but that invisible space where respect, care, and dignity lived. For the first time in years, she didn't feel forgotten. She didn't feel like a burden, she felt alive. Autumn was stripping the trees bare in the neighborhood. Golden and crimson leaves covered the sidewalks, crunching under slow footsteps and dancing in the wind, as if quietly celebrating a life that refused to fade. Margaret was discharged from the hospital. The ambulance dropped her off in front of her house, the one she feared she'd lose now feeling more alive than ever. Susan was waiting at the door, holding a hand-knitted scarf and a smile that said more than any welcome. "You look beautiful, Maggie, like the old days." Margaret let out a soft laugh as she patted Buddy's back. He hopped out of the ambulance with her, tail wagging like a happy pendulum. "I didn't think I'd step through this door again, but you did, and with honors." As she crossed the threshold, Margaret paused. She looked around like someone stepping back into a sacred place. Everything was the same, yet everything felt different. It wasn't just a house. It was her place in the world. Tom Carter had arranged for volunteers to clean and fix up the house, to make it cozy for her return. There were fresh flowers in the kitchen. On the table, a handwritten note. "Welcome home. Thank you for teaching us that faith can have 4 legs." Buddy wandered the living room, sniffing every corner, then lay by the unlit fireplace as if reclaiming his spot. In the days that followed, Margaret regained more than her health. She rediscovered routine. She took short walks in the garden, Buddy always at her side. Susan visited every afternoon for tea. Tom stopped by every other day to check on her, though they both knew it was an excuse to share laughs and simple moments. One morning, a 12-year-old boy with messy blonde hair and a red bike knocked on her door. "Are you the lady with the hero dog?" "That's what they say," Margaret replied, amused. "My sister uses a wheelchair, and she's scared of dogs. But I heard yours doesn't scare people. Could she meet him?" Margaret smiled, touched. "Of course, Buddy loves kids. He understands things we don't." Buddy, as if he knew they were talking about him, stood and approached the boy, calmly, kindly. The kid petted his head, shy at first, then with warmth. "It's like he knows not to move too fast," he said, surprised. "He does. He feels things, like an angel." That afternoon, Buddy visited the boy's sister, a little girl named Sophie. He lay by her wheelchair without a sound. Sophie, cautious at first, reached out to touch his muzzle. When she did, she smiled. It was her first smile in weeks, her mother said, watching with teary eyes. Margaret saw it all from the porch. She said nothing. She just placed a hand on her chest, feeling a deep warmth. It was the certainty that Buddy hadn't just saved her. He was now healing so many others. Winter hinted its arrival with the first morning frosts. The leaves had abandoned the trees, and the wind carried a deep silence that seemed to pause time. In that white calm, Margaret Harper's house remained a warm beacon, home to a soul reborn, and a dog now known by everyone in Waverly Pines as the Guardian of Hope. That morning, Margaret lit the fireplace. Buddy slept on his favorite blanket by the fire. Susan read the newspaper aloud while they made chamomile tea. "They say the library wants to hold an event to tell your story," Susan said between sips. "People are talking a lot about you and Buddy. Let them talk about him. I was just broken. He's the one who pieced me back together with his love." Buddy lifted his head at his name, then settled back with a contented sigh. Margaret had started keeping a journal. Each night, she wrote simple lines about her day, what she learned from Buddy, and how it felt to live with gratitude again. One afternoon, she got a letter from the town hall. She was invited to speak at a civic event where Buddy would be honored for his outstanding service to the community. Margaret was deeply moved, not for the recognition, but because for the first time, she felt something just was happening. Who'd have thought, Buddy? From being a shadow in my own home to being part of something that matters. The ceremony took place in the town square. Dozens of neighbors showed up. Sophie, the girl in the wheelchair, sat in the front row. Tom Carter spoke first. This dog didn't just protect a vulnerable woman. He reminded us what loyalty, empathy, and courage mean. He showed us that one good soul can change everything, even when the world seems to forget. Margaret stepped onto the small stage with Susan's help. She wore a blue coat and a scarf knitted by Sophie. Buddy walked beside her, calm, majestic, knowing this moment was his too. "I'm not good with words," Margaret began slowly, "but I know what it's like to be alone and to be seen again. Buddy gave me back my faith, And when you find faith, you start seeing beauty even in pain. Thank you all, but most of all, thank you to him. The applause was long, heartfelt, with many tissues in hands and teary eyes. Sophie let out a small cheer, and Buddy, in response, raised his head and gave a soft bark, as if accepting the ovation with humility. After the ceremony, a local reporter approached Margaret. Tell me in the comments, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story so far? Your opinion means a lot to me. Mrs. Harper, how would you sum up what Buddy has meant to your life? She thought for a moment, then smiled. He didn't save my life. He gave it back to me. Snow arrived in Waverley Pines like a white whisper, blanketing roofs, branches, and streets with a serene calm. It was the first big snowfall of the year. From her living room window, Margaret Harper watched silently as the world turned pure again. She held a mug of hot chocolate, and at her feet, as always, Buddy rested, breathing calmly, his ears alert even in sleep. The house was decorated with warm lights and garlands made by local school kids. Susan had brought a pine tree, and they decorated it together. On the fireplace, photos of recent moments. Margaret and Sophie reading together, Buddy in the lap of an autistic boy, Tom smiling beside them, Emily holding a certificate for Buddy, a state award for his outstanding community service. Margaret had written one last journal entry that morning. Her hands shook, but her soul was steady. I never imagined the last thing I'd do in life was truly live. Thank you, Buddy. You weren't my pet. You were my salvation. She closed the journal carefully and looked at Buddy. You know what I think? God lends us angels, and when they can't fly, he sends them on 4 legs. Buddy moved closer, resting his head in her lap with a sigh. Margaret spent the afternoon baking apple cookies with Susan, welcoming quick visits from neighbors, bringing Christmas cards, small gifts, a flower, a hug. It was as if the world wanted to give back everything she'd been denied. No one knew, but Margaret felt this would be her last Christmas, and she was at peace with that. On Christmas Eve, at dusk, Margaret walked slowly to the couch with Susan's help. She sat with difficulty, wrapped herself in a blanket knitted by Sophie, and called Buddy with a gentle gesture. Come, my boy, stay with me tonight. Buddy climbed onto the couch, pressed his body against hers, and closed his eyes. The fireplace crackled softly, and outside, the snow fell unhurriedly. Margaret stroked Buddy's head slowly as her breathing grew lighter. There was no fear, only gratitude, peace, love. At some point in the night, her fingers stilled on Buddy's fur. Her face rested with a serene smile, eyes closed, like someone falling asleep knowing they've loved and been loved. Buddy didn't move. He stayed by her side all night, silent, guarding her final dream. In the morning, Susan found her like that. She didn't cry right away. She knelt beside her, took Margaret's still warm hand and gently petted Buddy. She left the way she lived in the end, in peace, surrounded by love. Buddy looked at her, then rested his head back on Margaret's lap. A week later, in a quiet ceremony, under the snow-covered oaks at the local cemetery, everyone was there. Tom, Emily, Sophie, the neighbors. Margaret was buried with her blanket, her journal, and a photo of Buddy beside her. On her headstone, as she wished, was written, "Though the world forgot me, a noble soul found me." Buddy was legally adopted by Susan, though everyone knew he wasn't just a pet. He kept visiting homes of the elderly, comforting vulnerable kids, and whenever someone asked about his story, Sophie answered with a smile. That dog saved a lady, then saved everyone who knew her. Buddy lived many more years, calm and quiet, like a promise kept. And every time it snowed, someone would say, "Margaret's surely smiling from up there with her 4-legged angel by her side." Years passed, and though the seasons cycled quietly, Margaret Harper's memory never faded in Waverley Pines. Her house stayed just as she left it, turned by Susan and the community into a support center for the elderly and vulnerable children, called Margaret's Haven. Every corner breathed warmth. The fireplace still glowed in winter. Sophie's knitted blanket rested on the main armchair, and in a wooden display case, Margaret's journal stood as a testament to faith, love, and rebirth. Buddy lived to an old age. He never lost the calm shine in his eyes or that unique sensitivity. He was the first to greet every senior who came to the center and the last to join a hospital visit. He had a gift no one could explain. He sensed sadness with precision and turned it into tenderness. They often called him a 4-legged miracle, and no one dared disagree. When Buddy passed, it was peacefully, lying under the oak in the Haven's garden, as if he chose the moment himself. A small ceremony was held. His remains were buried beside Margaret, as she had requested, in a letter Susan found tucked among old books. On his headstone was carved, "Here lies Buddy, loyal companion, guardian of forgotten souls sent from heaven." James and Laura, Margaret's children, attended the ceremony quietly. They had changed a lot since those days. Shame and pain forced them to face their mistakes. Over time, they started visiting the Haven often. James, now retired, manages the foundation's finances. Laura teaches therapeutic writing workshops for older women. Both, in silence, learned to honor their mother's memory with actions, not words. Sophie, once a shy girl bound by fear, grew into a strong, determined young woman. She studied psychology and returned to Waverley Pines as a dog-assisted therapist. Today, she trains the new dogs at the Haven, all inspired by Buddy, all called service angels. Tom Carter retired with honors, but still visits the Haven once a month. He donated the bronze plaque at the center's entrance. It reads, "Never underestimate a dog's heart. Sometimes it's all you need to live again." And so, in that corner of the world where a forgotten woman once met a wounded dog, a legacy was born that kept touching lives long after they both closed their eyes for the last time. Because some encounters don't end with death. They transform into eternity. Thank you so much for sticking with this story until the end. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a ton and motivates us to keep bringing new stories every week. And since you're here, take a moment to check out another one of our stories that's popping up on your screen. Big hug and see you next time. Stay well.